On today's show, the franchise record for wins for the Cavs is 66. This team's on pace for 77. Just how high can they go? Plus, when Max Strus does return, where does he fit in? I've got Spencer German with me, and we discuss it all on today's Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my new Substack, The Inside Shot, 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Magazine, and a number of other stops along the way. I'm joined today by Spencer German, a coworker of mine at 92.3 The Fan, also covers the Cavs at Cleveland Cavaliers on SI. I want to say thank you first to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating, leave a nice review, and be a friend. Tell a friend about the Locked On Cavs podcast. Also available on YouTube. If you're watching, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. A proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show, of course, is brought to you by Robinhood Gold. They provide the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up today at robinhood.com/gold. So, Spencer, I do want to talk about, because this team has been so good early on that I don't think guys have started to get asked, are you surprised you're 17-1? And of course they all are, because no one thought that they would be this good in terms of record. I don't think anyone inside that locker room is surprised at how good they are at basketball. I think they're surprised that they haven't had off nights. But because of the start that they're off to, it puts basically every franchise record for winning into play. This team back in 08-09 won 66 games. They're on pace to win 77 games. I don't think they're getting to 77. I'd love to hear if you think they're getting to 77, but I certainly don't. But the way I look at this team is now, I don't know if I'm quite ready to say it'd be a failure if they don't break the franchise wins record, but I think it's something that very clearly could be in their crosshairs.
Yeah, I would just go on the record now and say I don't think they're getting to 77. That's obviously a little ridiculous.
Real bold, man.
I know. I'm sorry. You were expecting me to come on and have some real fiery takes on it.
I did.
I think along those lines specifically, there's going to be a point in the season where they probably hit a little bit of a lull, and it's an 82 game season. It's going to happen. And what honestly though, what's crazy is this opening stretch of the schedule might have been the hardest part of the schedule that they played, with all the back-to-backs they had, and they just had that 3 days off leading into the game against the Raptors on Sunday. That was the first time where it felt like there wasn't a Cavs game on for a healthy stretch of time. So maybe because they navigated that stretch now, they'll be okay. And we know obviously at some point Max Strus is coming back, and so they're going to get better from here in that regard. But no, 77's obviously never been, well, I guess it has. What was the
No, 73 is the record.
That's right, because the Warriors set the record. So yeah, that would be obviously the new record. Because it's never been done. I don't think that they're going to get there, but yeah, I mean, I think 66 feels attainable. And I think what's also interesting about this is the Eastern Conference doesn't feel like the gauntlet that maybe we thought it was going to be, at least not to this point. That can change. I think the Knicks are starting to maybe get things figured out a little bit. OG Anunoby just had a great game. I know he's on a little bit of a tear. The Bucks are back to 500, so they're playing a little bit better. But the 76ers are completely out of the picture right now. They have 3 wins this season. The Heat maybe aren't the Heat of old. They're getting a little bit older, and Jimmy Butler's not quite the same player. So I don't know. It feels like because the Eastern Conference isn't quite the gauntlet that we maybe thought it would be to this point, that there's a very, very good chance they could get there. And I feel good about the possibility. Here's what I'll say. 60 wins is a must at this point. If they don't get to 60, I think that's very disappointing. I'm sitting here today. I would venture to say I think they can at least match the 66.
Yeah, I think 60, I don't want to say should be the floor, because if an injury happens, but this team is going to win 55 plus games. I have zero doubt about that. And I always think it's interesting to watch how the betting markets change in real time. I'll go to FanDuel after just about every game, the day after every game, when they have an updated win total. And the Cavs opened up the season at 48.5. and now it's up to 58.5. Like they have bumped up their win total for the season by 10 games in the first month of the season, which is pretty unheard of. So that is the one thing that I do look at, but I think that this should be a 60-win team. And the other aspect of it that gives me a lot of confidence that they will win 60 plus and that they could get to 65, 66, 67 wins is the depth that they have. And I know we'll talk about that coming up a little bit in segment 2 as far as Max Strus goes. But Spencer, they're also a team that while they've had a little bit of postseason success last year by beating the Magic and getting to the second round, they're a team that's sort of in, I think, a sweet spot to have a really good regular season where they've got a lot of talent. They've got championship aspirations. They've got a lot of continuity. But realistically, this is a group that still hasn't proven anything yet. Like, we know that they're good and they've proven how good they are so far this season, but they haven't proven it for a full season yet because the first year they were together, they had that playoff failure. The second year, they had a ton of injuries in the regular season. Now everything is starting to click. And I think that we've seen this team be really focused and I think really motivated night in and night out. Like, I just don't think that they're going to be, and there will be some nights, of course, but I don't think that we're going to see a ton of nights where the Cavs just don't have it and lose because of that.
I think that's really well said. And, you know, I think the loss to the Celtics and then following it up, you have a back-to-back right after that. And you come home. It was also like a road, then home back-to-back. And you come home and you got the Pelicans, who were obviously banged up themselves. So, okay, fine. Like, you could throw that in as as context of the situation. But, you know, Darius Garland didn't play that night. Cavs were still dealing with a few injuries that night. And for them to like come out after the game that they played against the Celtics, you could tell they put a lot of stock in that when they wanted to keep the streak going. You know, they were trying to they knew that game had a little bit more weight to it than the ones that they played to that point. And they still came out. I forget what the final score was, but they put up like 100 and something points again. Like they boat raced them. Ty Jerome,
I think it was 128 to 100.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think it was close to 130. And like Ty Jerome had the great night that everyone was raving about. He had 29 points. Like it was that, to me, showed exactly what you're talking about, Danny. Like the idea of this team still feeling like they got to play with a chip on their shoulder, still feeling like they haven't proved anything. And like, okay, they lost the Celtics. Well, they kept saying at some point during the streak, they were like, we're going to lose and we have to see how we respond on the other side of it. I mean, they responded in spades. They came out and just kept doing what they were doing, and it led to another dominant win over a team that you should beat. And that's maybe the biggest thing is like they're beating the teams that they should beat. We know the Celtics are always going to give them a test. That team's just loaded. Everyone's calling them like the modern day Golden State Warriors. So for good reason, when that team gets up and they know they have a good competition in front of them, they're going to sort of play you tough, and the Cavs are going to have to sort of navigate that. They'll get a chance to get the rematch coming up this coming weekend. But yeah, like I think you're 100% right. Like the way that they're playing, the fact that they take pride in every single one of these games, the fact that the streak meant something to them, that they didn't want to see it end. Like they kept trying to sort of play the same style of basketball and find ways to win. I think they carry that throughout the rest of the season, even though the streak's now over, and they see how far they can take this thing and see what win total they can get to. So I think they will take pride in that. I 100% agree.
I do too. And I think that the one last test that I'm waiting to see this team ace, because they've aced every test they've had so far. And you brought up the schedule a little bit earlier. They played 17 games in the first 29 days of the season. That is an absurd number. They were the last team in the NBA to have back-to-back days off. Like that is, you can say what you want about the quality of the opponents towards the end of that streak, but at a certain point, I think they stopped playing against opponents and they were playing against the fact that they were not well rested and that they had a target on their back. But I have the stretch of games right after Christmas where they go to Denver. They have a back-to-back in Golden State and then in Los Angeles against the Lakers. And then they close out a 4-game road trip in Dallas. I think that is kind of the next really big stretch of games. Not to say that there aren't big games between now and then, because there are, but that's the next one where it's like, okay, this is the first trip out west. This is, I think, the next opportunity for us to learn about what this team looks like. And by that point, they could be getting healthier again. Maybe they have Max Strus in the lineup when that time does come. I want to talk about What's it going to look like for the Cavs when Max does return? Because that should be within the next few weeks if it goes according to the timeline. What's that rotation going to look like? We're going to talk about that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 per month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms do apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. I've been telling you a lot about FanDuel Sportsbook because they are America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you do win. I mentioned earlier, the Cavs win total for the season started at 48.5. It's up to 58.5 right now. It's an incredible jump, but it's also, if you think that they're going to win 60 games like Spencer and I do, if you were listening to the first segment of the show, it's at plus 102 for them to get 59 wins. So you're getting a little bit of help too. It's not quite the favorite there. FanDuel thinks that they're going to win 58 games on the nose. I think it's going to be a little bit over that. Or maybe you like another future that involves the Cavs, which would be Ty Jerome winning 6th man of the year. He's third. He was off the board last week. He's now third at plus 900. He's only behind Peyton Pritchard from Boston and Buddy Hield from Golden State. So maybe you like one of those two Cavs futures, or maybe you just think the Cavs are going to beat the Atlanta Hawks tonight. I don't know. But if you put $5 on your first bet with FanDuel and that bet wins, you will get $150 in bonus bets coming back your way. So again, get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel, FanDuel.com. Again, go to FanDuel.com today. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review and be a friend. Tell a friend about the podcast. If you're watching this video right now on YouTube too, hit that thumbs up button for me. But Spencer, Max Strus I don't think he's going to be someone that's like touted as a trade deadline acquisition because we're too far ahead of that when he's expected to return to the floor, which I do think, and we're getting a lot of questions about this now. I do think that we're still a few weeks away from seeing Max Strus on the floor, but I think we're getting to the point where it's worth starting to talk about what this team is going to look like. And part of the reason why it's worth it is because that 17-1 record, what they have going on right now, very clearly is working. But where Kenny Atkinson slots in Max Strus and what that looks like, I mentioned that West Coast trip is the first real or the next real test for the Cavs. I think integrating Max Strus into this team is the next real test for Kenny Atkinson.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And what's interesting with this is, you talk about the depth of this team. It does feel like, you get a guy like that back. Like there's not a lot of teams that are going to get somebody that is generally going to be a starting player or potentially a starting player for your team like at that time of year and just kind of insert them instantly, inject them into your lineup. And yeah, I'm fascinated to see how this kind of works. I think I would assume that when he comes back, he'll have a minutes restriction. He probably I'm guessing he won't be in the starting lineup at first because of that minutes restriction, unless maybe they start him and then, just kind of manage the minutes after he gets that initial spurt.
Right.
But like how he's deployed is going to be fascinating to me. And I find it interesting because Kenny Atkinson's kind of been asked about it a little bit already. Just, how are you going to insert him into the lineup? And he keeps kind of saying like, I'm not sure yet. Like I haven't thought too much about it.
Right.
And I don't know. Like I wouldn't be surprised. I was just talking about this the other night. I wouldn't be surprised if Strus is like a starter in theory, but like Kenny Atkinson just basically deploys who he thinks is the right person for that 3 spot based off of the matchup. Like maybe there's a matchup where he thinks Max Strus is the better option, but then there's maybe a night where he thinks Isaac Okoro is. And maybe the only reason I'm wrong in this is that you like to get somebody who kind of knows consistently what their role is. And I think that is important for this team. Karis LeVert for a couple years there, he was kind of in and out of like being a starter, being a bench guy. And once he kind of got a set role, it was like, hey, you're first up off the bench for us. He thrived. So I get where like you want to kind of have set roles for people, but I really wouldn't be surprised because we've even seen that from Kenny Atkinson to this point. Like Dean Wade started for a little while. Isaac Okoro's been starting at the 3 spot more of late. So like it's crazy that he's going to have so many options at his disposal. And yeah, maybe that initial return for Max Strus is the opportunity to see and get a feel of like where and when he wants to deploy Max as the potential starter, because he's going to have a stretch there where he probably isn't playing the main minutes that he normally would play. But right. Yeah, it's a massive luxury for Kenny for sure.
Right. That is the thing that is he in the start? I would be a little surprised if like his first game back, he's in the starting lineup, just because when you're coming off of that long of a layoff and he's somebody that because it's a lower body injury, like he's going to have to work his way into shape on the floor. Like you can only kind of get into game shape by playing in games. That is something I believe. I think that's something a lot of athletes believe. And that's going to take a little bit of time. So if you're starting him and he's on like a 15-minute restriction those first few games, I don't know that it makes a ton of sense to have him in there. I think ultimately he will be a starter, but I also do wonder, how does this affect the rest of the rotation? Because when the team has been healthy without Max Strus, Kenny has pretty consistently played 10 guys. And if you look at the 10 guys that he's played, who of those guys, and I know that Georges Niang is coming off of a really poor game on Sunday night, and everyone right now that is screaming is just saying Georges Niang shouldn't be playing. But he has had a really good year. Like he deserves to be in the rotation outside of
he's
Sunday
got his
night.
Best shooting percentage of his career right now.
Right. He's been really good, and he had a terrible night against Toronto. It happens. Everyone's going to be screaming Georges Niang as they're listening to this right now. But I don't know how you look at any of those 10 guys, and I realize that not everyone in that group of 10 is on the same level, but it's hard to look at someone like Sam Merrill and say, hey, Max Strus is back. You're not going to, your minutes are gone. Or Ty Jerome, who's playing the fewest minutes per game still of that group of 10, but was nominated for Eastern Conference Player of the Week on Monday this week. You can't cut his minutes. Like he's been arguably your 5th or 6th best player. So yeah. I don't know where the minutes for Max are going to come from, because Kenny has historically, as a coach, wanted to keep minutes down and wanted to have a larger rotation. Now, part of that was the teams that he was coaching in Brooklyn, especially at the beginning of his tenure, were very different in terms of what their goals were than the team he's coaching right now, which has championship aspirations. But I do think, Spencer, and maybe you disagree with this, but I do think we're going to see Kenny try and play, at least at the start, when Max comes back. I think we're going to see him try and play 11 guys.
I think you're right. And you know, it's funny, like in previous years with JB Bickerstaff, and this is going to sound like a shot at JB Bickerstaff. I don't mean it to just be like, you know, crap on JB Bickerstaff. That's not what I'm trying to do. But like, let's be honest, like one of the biggest things that we sort of worried about with him, and when we saw in the playoffs, was just like the adjustments. Like we didn't ever, and I thought that Kenny, I'm trying to remember which game it was, but it's, you know, several games ago, he played that lineup late in a game where he took Jared Allen out because he just wasn't playing very well. And he went super small, and he had like Dean in there with like Ty and Donovan, and Mobley came back in. And then I think Karis actually replaced Dean.
It was against Brooklyn. Yeah. Karis LeVert was playing power forward. It was against Brooklyn. I know exactly what you're talking about. And he said he played Karis LeVert at power forward, which Karis had said, I talked to Karis off on the side. He said he had never played power forward before in his life. Because he wanted to be able to have that speed on the floor at that spot. So he has made adjustments like that. That I think has been one of the best parts of seeing him as head coach of this team. Yeah.
And the reason I referenced that though is because like that night he got asked, you know, what inspired that lineup? Like what triggered that? And his answer was awesome, because he just basically said like nothing else was working. And so I just kind of threw something out there and was trying to see if it would give us a spark. And it did. And it worked that night. And like part of that is like, you get lucky sometimes as a coach, right? You don't always know that type of thing's going to work. But that's the thing that JB Bickerstaff didn't do. And like on one hand, JB deserves credit because, he stuck with his guys and he was like, these guys got me here. I'm going to trust them. But on the other hand, like Kenny is brilliant in that way. And that's why, like going back to the top of this conversation, like the next big test for him is going to be how he integrates Max Strus into this lineup. I just have this trust right now. And again, it's easy to say that when the team's 17-1, but
Right.
like I have this trust that Kenny is going to figure this thing out and he's going to find some way to get Max to play to his potential, whether it's in the starting lineup at some point, whether it's off the bench when he first comes back, and it's just going to kind of flow in a nice way. And then he'll have other lineups that are sort of inspired off of Max Strus being back out there. And even if he still is going like 10, 11 deep, which like you said, that's kind of been his MO throughout his career. Like I just trust that he's going to make it work and it's going to, produce or birth these different iterations of the team and these different lineups that have success, and they'll just keep playing with the style that they're playing. So it's such a unique, I mean, listen, it's a challenge for Kenny, but it's also like a luxury to have this deep of a roster. And it's funny because like I spent the last couple of years like boasting about how deep this team was, and then we just never saw it get used to its full potential. And now we're actually seeing it, and it's like, man, this thing really had some juice to it this whole time. And thank God that somebody like Kenny Atkinson came in to really tap into that and get the most out of all these different players.
Yes, that has been one of the best things that Kenny has done so far this year. And Sam Merrill is the guy that comes to mind when you say like the depth that has existed that hasn't necessarily been used. Like they couldn't figure out a way to make Sam Merrill a useful player, and now I'm not sure that he's quite a vital cog in this team, but he's a really important guy coming off the bench. What lineups do we want to see Max Strus with when he returns? We'll talk about that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Built Rewards. If you're a renter, I would start taking advantage of Built Rewards if I were you. Here's the thing. You can earn points on groceries, travel, practically anything else you buy in real life, right? You earn points on just about anything. I know I earn points on a ton of things. So why wouldn't you start earning points on rent? One of the biggest monthly expenses you might have is paying your rent every month. Built changed the game by letting renters earn high value points on rent and around their neighborhood. There's no cost to join Built. And as a member, you will earn valuable points on rent and your everyday spending. Built points can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, and even the ones you haven't heard of. There are over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties around the world that you can redeem your Built points towards. Points can also be redeemed towards a future rent payment and unique experiences that only Built members can access. So if you're not earning points on rent, the next question is why not? Start earning points on your rent that you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnba. That's joinbilt.com/lockedonnba, LOCKEDONNBA. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Again, that's joinbuilt.com/lockedonnba to start earning points on your rent payments today. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere else. And if you're watching on YouTube right now, hit that thumbs up button for me. Make sure you're subscribed too. Don't want you to miss any of the latest Locked On Cavs content. And I don't want you to miss when Max Strus comes back for the Cavs, because that will be at some point. I would imagine he's going to play in the month of December. And who he plays with and what the lineups look like. I sort of picture Kenny as like this mad scientist right now. Not that the Max Strus return is imminent or that it's always on the front of his mind, but I think it's going to give him the ability to get even more creative. Like you mentioned that lineup that he put out there against Brooklyn, and how much different does that lineup look? And I understand Ty Jerome since then has gotten much better.
Yeah.
Or has played much better, I guess I should say, in terms of the scoring output. But how much different does that lineup look if they're playing small with Darius, Donovan, Karras, Max Strus, and Evan? Like, I think that is one of the lineups that I could see closing out games and being super successful. And I just wonder how many of those there are.
Yeah, I mean, just throwing that out there, sort of spitballing it, I like that one sounds intriguing to me, because that is kind of like, it's Evan who's the really, I think, the key to all this, like his development, him getting better as a player, which has been on full display this year. With your two guards who kind of, everything kind of flows through them. And then, you have mixed in there Ty Jerome, who's just been phenomenal. And who saw that coming. And yeah, like Max sort of being the other element of that seems like a really, really fun one. Especially knowing like sort of just kind of the scrappy defensive player that he is. And it certainly puts a lot more on Evan being that 5 spot, but that those types of lineups are kind of what I'm interested in. I think there's certainly iterations of that style of lineup that maybe like one of DG or Donovan is off the floor and it's Max alongside, and maybe Jarrett is still out there, or maybe you insert a Karras or a Dean Wade as kind of a little bit of a bigger wing that can sort of play one of those spots for you too, to help sort of space the floor. But yeah, those are sort of the style or the ilk of lineups I'm thinking about already when it comes to Max Strus, because he's another guy that again, when they signed him last off season, he was brought in to help sort of be that floor spacer, be that guy that could knock down threes. And I always think back to the quote from Eric Spoelstra about like, yeah, he's an ignitable player. Like that was the word that he used to describe him. Like imagine those lineups on a night where he is just lights out hitting from outside, and it's just like he's a threat. Donovan's a threat. If Darius is out there, he's a threat. Maybe Dean Wade is out there and he's a threat. And then you have Evan also just kind of wreaking havoc, doing whatever he wants as he attacks the basket. Like that stuff is already super intriguing to me, and I can't wait to see, again, like the mad scientist at work and Kenny Atkinson, how he sort of makes all those things kind of flow together and makes these lineups that include Max work together.
So some of the things that I am very interested in seeing, because part of what Kenny has changed this year has been how he pairs the core 4, right? Like in the past 2 years, we had seen Donovan play a ton of minutes with Evan and Darius off the floor where he's with Jarrett Allen. And then Darius would play those minutes with Evan when Jarrett and Donovan would sit. That's flipped this year where Donovan's playing a ton of minutes with Evan and vice versa. So last year, the group that Max was the most part of was when he would be on the floor with Donovan and Jarrett Allen. And that is kind of when that pairing worked as the best. Like that's when that group was at its best, is when Max Strus was out there alongside them. So I'm curious, how does that translate? Because Donovan and Evan have been one of the best 2-man duos in basketball. Like their net rating is off the charts. It's the best 2-man group. That's a high volume group that the Cavs play. I'm curious if because he was able to accentuate what Donovan and Jarrett did well, how does that transfer to Donovan playing with Evan? Like, is he going to be able to inject, or I guess to use yours and Eric Spoelstra's word, is he going to be able to ignite that group even further? Like, that is the one thing that I'm very interested to find out. Or does he spend more time with Darius and Jarrett in that group and get more out of that group? Like that, I don't know what the answer is going to be, and I'm fascinated to find out.
Yeah, no, I think that's an awesome question. And I also think it's interesting because it felt like, especially early in the season last year, because Jarrett was hurt, it felt like Max and Evan really built some chemistry. And then obviously there was the injuries kind of in between. Mobley was out for an extended period of time, and even when they came back like late in the year, I thought they sort of rekindled that kinship, that sort of the connection that they had. And so it kind of goes back to how Evan played in the playoffs last year, like that Celtics series. He started taking over games, and we were hoping to see sort of more from him, which is what we have seen. So I am fascinated, to your point, of seeing how Evan and Max play together in their second year together, new system, coach who has some different ideas and is bringing some different things to the table, which is almost why, like to your point on how great Mobley and Donovan have been together. Throwing Max Strus into that group just really intrigues me and really entices me, because that could be a lot of fun, just given how those two played together last year and now how maybe the three of them all play together this year. So I almost feel like that might be where they start, especially because, don't break up a good thing, right? Like if Mitchell and Mobley are playing so well together, you'd think that Kenny would kind of stick that out and then just see where Max kind of fits with that group. But yeah, I think it could work the other way too, where because I think he played very well with Jarrett last year as well, and sort of see how it goes with the other trio. But yeah, there's a lot of options obviously on the table for Max in general.
Yeah, we'll see what it looks like when Max does return from this ankle injury that, by all accounts, pretty nasty. Like I said, I think he's probably going to be back on the floor before the end of 2024, but I don't know exactly when. All Kenny will say is that he's progressing, but as of earlier this week, he had not yet progressed to contact work. So I think that says he's still a little ways away, but I think it's fair to start imagining what the Cavs will look like when he's back. Spencer, thanks so much for hopping on Locked On Cavs today. Where can everyone find you?
You can find me on X at Spencito_ you see at the bottom there. Obviously, as Danny alluded to, I'm a host at 92 through the Fan, so you can listen to me there. But I would tell you, don't even bother trying to figure out when I'm on, because it's very, very random. It could be anytime. So just listen and hope that you hear somebody tease that I'm coming on, and hopefully you'll get a chance to hear me down the line. And then as Danny also mentioned, cover the Cavs for Cleveland Cavaliers on SI. Do a bunch of different stuff over there. We have a YouTube channel, so you can check me out over there as well. And yeah, I always appreciate doing this, man. Always enjoy talking Cavs with you. You're one of the best in the business when it comes to covering this team. So grateful to always jump in on the conversation and chop it up with you.
Well, you're too kind, and your check will be in the mail for those kind words. But again, thanks for doing this, man. Very much appreciate it. And I appreciate you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, everywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review as well. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure your friend is subscribed as well. Also, shows on YouTube. If you're watching this right now, hit that thumbs up button for me before we get out of here. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell as well. And if you're looking for more written Locked On Cavs, we've got a newsletter. If you're looking for more Cavs content from me, check out my new Substack, The Inside Shot. I will be running a Black Friday sale. So if you're waiting to sign up, if you're waiting to subscribe there, Black Friday, there's going to be a very nice deal for you. So maybe just hang out another day, but get yourself familiar with it. I will talk to you tomorrow after the Cavs take on the Atlanta Hawks in the first of 2 matchups with the Birds from Atlanta this week. Keep it locked here on Locked On Cavs.